offensively. I think we've been scoring at will. We can get to the free throw line a little bit more, get more paint touches, and we also want to shoot the three a little bit better.
The fluorescent lights of the Iowa City television studio cast harsh shadows across, and Nizzy Clark's weathered hands as she sat across from the interviewer, her fingers nervously twisting the wedding ring she had worn for 28 years. The weight of both time and sacrifice pressing down on her as if the very band of gold carried the history of every unspoken choice, every buried dream, every night of silence endured so her daughter could rise, and she knew with aching certainty that what she was about to reveal would forever change how the world saw Caitlin's meteoric journey into basketball stardom, because behind every story of greatness lies a hidden cost that often no one dares to acknowledge. A cost borne not by the ones celebrated, but by those who quietly fade into the background to make space for brilliance, and sitting under the merciless glow of those studio lights, knew she could no longer keep her silence. She had carried secrets for too long, secrets that had lived in her bones and settled in her heart like stones at the bottom of a river, heavy but unmoving, and it was only in this moment, in front of strangers and cameras, that she finally felt the pull to let them go. To tell the world that a mother's love is not always tidy, not always simple, but often a story of immense surrender, of giving up one's own future so another life may bloom. How? She wondered silently. Is it possible that a mother's love can be so complete, so selfless, that she would willingly sacrifice her own identity, her own ambitions, her very sense of self, all while keeping it hidden from the very person she was doing it for? That was the question that pulsed beneath her ribs as she sat waiting for the first inquiry, aware that what was about to come wasn't simply an interview about Caitlin Clark's career trajectory, but the unveiling of a deeper, more fragile truth. The story not of a superstar athlete, but of a woman who had quietly stepped into the shadows so her daughter could shine in the light. What you're about to discover, and thought as her lips trembled, isn't just the story of how Caitlin Clark became the most electrifying player in women's basketball history, but the untold truth of a mother who gave up everything she had ever wanted so her daughter could have everything she deserved. A story buried beneath the cheers of packed arenas and the dazzling statistics that fill headlines. A story that reveals that behind every triumph exists a hidden ledger of sacrifices, invisible, but real. But what nobody in that studio, nor in the millions of homes where the broadcast would one day be replayed, could have known was that sacrifice went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. That the life she had quietly forfeited had left scars and unspoken griefs that she had carried silently for more than 15 years. And when she finally chose to bring it into the light, when she finally spoke the truth, her confession would leave everyone who heard it completely speechless. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was so profoundly human, so raw in its simplicity, so rare in a world where sacrifice is often masked by platitudes but seldom revealed in its entirety. The interview had been scheduled as a routine feature, just another profile piece about Caitlin's rise to the WNBA, a celebratory look at a hometown girl who had made good on every promise of greatness, but something in Anne's demeanor that morning suggested this would be anything but routine. She had arrived an hour early, sitting in her car in the parking lot with the engine off, the summer air thick with humidity, rehearsing words she had never spoken aloud, staring at the dashboard as though it might offer her courage, preparing to share secrets that had been her silent companions for more than half her life. She had scrolled through her phone again and again, half hoping for a message that would delay the interview, an excuse that would let her retreat back into the safety of silence, but none came, and so she walked in, her hands trembling as the makeup artist applied foundation to her cheeks, noticing the fine tremors that even Anne herself could not still, the way she checked her phone as if clinging to one last out. By the time she sat in the chair under the lights, the decision had already been made. She would no longer hide. Mrs. Clark, the interviewer began gently, their voice carefully calibrated, as though sensing the fragility of the moment. Everyone knows Caitlin as this incredible force on the basketball court. But what was she like as a little girl? It was a simple enough question, but one that unlocked 1,000 memories, and Anne's eyes softened instantly, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly as she thought back to those early days when Caitlin was still small, before the weight of expectation, before the roar of arenas, before the brand deals and the media glare. She was magic, and said at last, her voice carrying that particular warmth that only comes from a mother remembering her child's innocence, her tone wrapping the word in a mixture of wonder and nostalgia. From the time she could walk, she had a basketball in her hands. Not a toy basketball, no, a real one, almost as big as she was. She dragged it everywhere, slept with it, ate with it. She wasn't just a little girl who liked a game. She was born for it. The interviewer smiled at the tenderness in her voice, not realizing that this seemingly simple question had opened a door and had kept locked for years, a door behind which both light and shadows lived. The memories flooded in, not just the happy images of a talented child with endless energy and laughter, but the darker ones, the memories that revealed the true cost of nurturing greatness, the hidden bargains made in kitchens and late-night drives, the decisions that looked small from the outside but meant everything inside. Tell me about those early years, the interviewer continued. What was it like raising such a talented athlete? Anne's fingers found her wedding ring again, twisting it as if it could anchor her to something steady. This was the moment she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure, the moment where she would no longer be able to pretend her own story didn't matter. Well, she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper. That's actually what I wanted to talk about today, because the story everyone knows, it's not the whole truth. The camera operator leaned forward, adjusting his lens, sensing that something important was about to unfold, while Anne drew in a long, deliberate breath, the kind of breath one takes before stepping off a cliff, knowing there's no going back once you leap. When Caitlin was 8 years old, Anne continued, her voice growing steadier now as though carried by the memory itself. She came to me and said she wanted to play on the boys' basketball team because the girls' league in our area just wasn't competitive enough. Most parents would have said no, told their daughter to be patient, to wait for better opportunities, but when I looked at her, this fierce, determined little person, so certain of who she was even then, I knew she was right. And paused, her throat tightening as tears welled in her eyes. And that decision, that one small yes, set everything in motion. But what nobody knew, what nobody has ever known, is that supporting Caitlin's basketball dreams meant I had to give up mine. Her voice broke on the last word, and she quickly reached for a tissue, dabbing at her eyes, leaving faint smudges of mascara on the white paper. The interviewer, sensing they had reached the heart of something profound, leaned in gently. What do you mean? For a moment, Anne could not speak, the silence stretching in the studio until it felt like another presence. Finally, she inhaled, steadying herself. I had dreams too, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I was an artist. I painted. I had been accepted to a graduate program in fine arts when I found out I was pregnant with Caitlin. I had always told myself I'd go back, that once the kids were older, I would return to that part of myself. But then Caitlin picked up that basketball, and I saw the fire in her, and I knew I couldn't do both. So I chose her, and I never told her what it cost me, because I never wanted her to carry that weight. I wanted her to believe she deserved everything she had worked for, without guilt, without hesitation. I wanted her to be free, even if it meant I wasn't. The tears spilled freely now, her voice carrying both sorrow and pride, grief and gratitude, and for a long moment the studio was silent except for the quiet hum of the lights overhead. Anne's confession was not about regret so much as it was about truth. The truth that every act of greatness is built on unseen sacrifices. The truth that family love often means choosing another's dream over your own. The truth that even hidden pain can coexist with fierce joy.
And coach, I mentioned that, the last couple games, you've generated good looks, like you like the process offensively. Just what are some things maybe you can take from these last couple games and maybe just build?
The lights in the Iowa City studio glared down with clinical brightness, bouncing off the polished floor and catching the faint tremor in Nizzy Clark's hands as she sat across from the interviewer, twisting the gold wedding band that had circled her finger for 28 years, a band that held more than vows. It carried years of quiet sacrifice, silenced ambitions, and the weight of a mother's hidden story that she was finally ready to reveal, even though she knew it would forever reshape the way people understood her daughter Caitlin's rise to basketball stardom, because the truth behind greatness is rarely neat and rarely solitary. It is built upon countless unseen sacrifices, and was about to lay bare her own. The interview had been scheduled as a celebratory piece on Caitlyn's journey to the WNBA, another uplifting feature about the young superstar redefining women's basketball. But Anne's presence in that chair, her steady yet nervous demeanor, hinted that this conversation would be something far more profound, something that had been locked away for more than a decade and a half. When the interviewer began gently, asking the simple, disarming question of what Caitlyn had been like as a little girl, Anne's eyes softened, her body loosening as her mind drifted back to those tender days, and she smiled faintly as she described her daughter as magic, recalling how from the moment she could walk, she had carried a basketball larger than her own body, dragging it everywhere as if it were part of her, a sign that she was born with a rare fire that would one day set courts ablaze. But that soft recollection quickly gave way to the storm that lay beneath, because what the world saw as a miraculous journey of talent and determination was, in Anne's memory, also a story of trade-offs, of quiet nights spent weighing dreams against responsibilities, of a constant battle between the life she once envisioned for herself and the life she chose to build for her child. With her fingers still worrying the ring on her hand, Anne leaned closer and revealed the truth. When Caitlyn was just 7 years old, she herself had been accepted to law school, not just accepted but granted a full scholarship to Drake University, the result of 2 years of late nights spent studying for the LSAT after Caitlyn went to bed. 2 years of meticulous preparation fueled by her own dream of becoming a family law attorney, someone who could guide other families through hardship, with empathy and skill. For Anne, that acceptance letter had been the validation of her own potential, proof that she was more than a wife and mother, that she had an identity beyond the roles she fulfilled, and yet she had never told anyone about it, not even her husband Brent, choosing instead to hide the letter in her jewelry box, taking it out occasionally in the silence of the night, reading it over and over, reminding herself that at one point her dreams had been real and within reach. But life has a way of demanding choices, and at the very moment her acceptance arrived, Caitlyn's basketball gifts were blooming with an intensity that could not be ignored, her need for resources and support. Camps, coaches, travel teams, endless hours of gym time, growing alongside her talent, and a knew deep in her heart that something had to give, that every dollar, every hour, every ounce of energy had to be redirected toward nurturing Caitlyn's potential if she was to have any chance at fulfilling it. So, Anne made the decision to turn down law school, silently and without recognition, trading in her private dream for the public pursuit of her daughters, and she never told Caitlyn because she refused to let her child carry the guilt of that choice, refusing to let her think she was a burden when in truth she was the greatest gift. Instead, Anne took a job at a local bank, chosen not for prestige or passion, but for the flexible hours that allowed her to be there for every practice, every game, every long tournament weekend on the road, reshaping her life completely.